This is Hilo Base. Come in. Seawit, this is K6MM. Come in. Seawit, this is Hilo Base. Come in. Mac, are you there? Seawit.
So good?
Yeah,
So far, so good.
that's the sign off.
Looks good.
It's always good to focus your brain. So thanks for inviting me. It's always fun to be with you guys. I'd rather it was face-to-face at the Boulevard Cafe, but I will say this is the next best thing. You know, hopefully we'll look forward, as Alan was saying, maybe next spring, next summer. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in person. Let's change a slide and see if that works. Happy Veterans Day, in case any vets are out there. Very cool.
Yes, thank you, veterans.
So I'm going to ask you to go on a trip with me to a part of the world that unfortunately most humanoids never get to go to. I'm lucky in that regard. And there are a few of you on this call that have been to places like this too in the past. But to start out with, because there are a couple folks, and I actually expected a couple more that don't know anything about what we do, I thought I'd throw up the definition of a DXpedition, because it's always good to review what that really means. So this is kind of what I put together, a really quick overview. It's just a long distance trip organized by a bunch of us to an exotic place. And the place is typically an island or a country or some specific geographical grid. And the reason it's exotic, it's because of its remoteness, or because there aren't very few, if any, radio amateurs active from that place. Why do we bother? Well, one is, of course, to accept the challenge of operating a station someplace remotely, sometimes in an in-hospital region. Also the joy of just helping other operators who work us, get a contact, to get credit for it, and then work toward some kind of an award that they appreciate. And of course, third, not the least, it's a lot of fun to do this. By the way, the first organized DXpedition was in 1947. And that was Thor Heyerdahl on the Kon-Tiki when he went from Polynesia to Peru. That's the call sign that was used, Lima, Italy 2 Bravo. Go do a search on that. You'll find out that he had a whole bunch of radios and antennas. He was carrying an NC-173 receiver, and very interesting.
There's also a movie about it.
There are several documentaries about it. That's right. To get us oriented a little bit, let's in case you can't throw a dart on the calendar or on the map and pinpoint Palmyra yourself. It's 1,000 miles southwest of Hawaii, and it's sitting about 350 miles above the equator. And it's in the region of a lot of other places that are fun to work, like Jarvis Island and Baker and Howland, and not very far from Kingman Reef. It's near Johnston Atoll. And of course, further up north is Wake, and out west, the Marianas. All of these islands, of course, played a key role during World War II. They were all strategically important places. It's becoming harder and harder to get permission to go operate in these locations, because they're overseen largely by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife or one of the military branches. And these days in particular, it's hard to get permission to go. Hopefully that'll change in the future. But another perspective on this is, if you look at a polar map, the red dot being Palmyra, and you can take a look, it's obviously thousands of miles from anywhere. It literally is in the middle of nowhere. And some people say that it's about as far away from humanity as you can get. And during this pandemic, this is probably where all of us on this phone call would like to be. This is as far away from humanity as we could possibly get. That's right. Here's a nice aerial view of Palmyra. It's often called Palmyra Island, but it isn't really an island. It's an atoll. Yeah. And the reason it's an atoll is because it's surrounded by a coral reef. So many of the islands out in the Pacific are like that. They're surrounded by a coral reef, which is basically coral and sand. And in this particular case, You can see the general shape. It's a horseshoe-shaped reef. The platform is this coral and sands, about 680 acres. It's 5 miles long and 1.5 miles wide. If you could walk around the coastline, it's 12 miles. The largest island is sitting there and is Cooper, and that's what where my destination was. And its signature um, benefit from a travel point of view is the 5,000-foot runway that's there. And this is another luxury. When you go on these expeditions, often you're not going to get there by air travel because there's no place to land. Often you have to take a boat and climb up a rock or something to get on an island. In this case, it's nice that there's relatively easy access. This atoll is also enclosed by 3 lagoons appropriately named east, central, and west, and have an average depth of about 150 feet. The island is or this atoll is probably truly one of the most spectacular places you could go. It's a wonderful marine wilderness, and the reason is simple. Nobody's ever settled there. Nobody's ever colonized Palmyra. It has an extremely large bird sanctuary. There's at least 11 different species of birds, millions of birds, and a huge crab population, different kinds of crabs. It's a breeding grounds for several different kinds of sharks. And the foliage is magnificently green and plentiful. And because it's near the equator, you can expect the climate to be hot, humid, rainy, and it certainly is. Lots of dense vegetation there. Has an interesting history. It was named after a ship, as often these islands are. This particular case, Captain Sawley's ship in 1802. And it was shipwrecked near a reef. In 1862, it was formally annexed to the Kingdom of Hawaii, and then in 1898, both Hawaii and Palmyra were annexed by the U.S. In 1911, I'm not sure what the history is on this, but a judge named Henry Cooper bought Palmyra Atoll, and then 11 years later, he sold it to a family in Hawaii named the Fuller-Leo family. And the Fuller-Leo family began a coconut harvesting business, which they ran for about 20 years until 1940, when the U.S. Navy said we need to set up a naval air station there, which we need to use as a refueling station. So move aside, and they came in. They actually had 2,500 personnel stationed there. And this is what it looked like in the lower left corner. They basically leveled the place so they could build about 200 buildings and a hospital and put in a lot of airstrips. And this is a map that I found on Palmyra and was able to take a photograph of it. On June 30th, 1944, that's what Palmyra looked like. In 2000, the Fuller-Leo family kept their business going until 2000, and then they finally decided to sell it. They sold it to the Nature Conservancy for $30 million, and a year later, TNC sold half of it to U.S. Fish and Wildlife and kept the biggest island, Cooper Island, to use for research. And TNC created what's called a Palmyra Atoll Research Consortium, PARC. And of course, when we landed there, we quickly changed the name to the Palmyra Amateur Radio Club, by the way. And of course, it's become a key center for studying climate change, the coral reefs, the whole health of that area, and the marine restoration and so forth. And then in 2009, the U.S. established a new, what's called a Pacific Marine National Monument, which consists of these 7 islands: Johnston, Kingman, Palmyra, Jarvis, Wake, Holland, and Baker. It's called the Pacific Remote Islands Marine National Monument, and it's overseen by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Well, so at this point, you're probably thinking, wow, this sounds like a really great place, and so did we, and we started doing some research and found some very interesting things about Palmyra that really didn't have that great a reputation. You start looking at some of the articles and reading some of the books about this place, and these are some of the adjectives that pop up. It's strange, it's hostile, it's evil, it's cursed, and it's haunted. Somebody described it as being a paranormal paradise. Somebody else described it as being, geez, this is a land of mystery, intrigue, and violence. And then there's my personal favorite, a postcard paradise with a dangerous heart. I mean, it's like, what's going on here? Well, you take a look, and of course, you're going to find the usual wrecks and woe from a lot of ships that were passing in the night that crashed. It became shipwrecked there. A lot of reports of disappearing boats and ships and planes. There was the record of a Spanish pirate ship that smashed on the reefs, and the survivors were purported to have bringing some treasure on a raft, buried it, and then tried to escape, but didn't make it. Some people think there's still some treasure buried on Palmyra someplace. And so, and on it goes. Probably during World War II, the most serious complaints came from some of the sailors who said, I can't stand it here anymore. I got to go home. Whether they were homesick or truly feeling overwhelmed, having the overwhelming feelings of dread, who knows? But there was this constant complaint about feeling really uncomfortable and threatened here. More recently, there were some real disasters that did occur. Documented. For example, this is kind of my Palmyra curse #1, which took place on July 9th in 1947, where a C-46 cargo plane actually crashed at night, and unfortunately a radioman lost his arm and leg, and the crew members took him ashore. They were able to get in touch with a ham radio operator named Joseph Bonstead out in New Jersey, who was able to get a local surgeon to communicate instructions to one of the staff members there, who was able to give this poor guy some transfusions of blood. And fortunately that saved his life. A rescue plane came later and he was flown back to Hawaii, where he survived. More recently, in 1974, Palmyra became the scene of a very famous double murder that took place. And so I'll introduce you to the cast of characters here. These are the bad guys. I'll introduce you to Buck Walker and his girlfriend, Stephanie Stearns. Buck was an ex-con, did some time in San Quentin for armed robbery and was a drug dealer. And during a sting operation, I guess he got wind that he was going to be arrested again. So he and his girlfriend hopped on a boat called the Iola they owned. It wasn't very seaworthy, but they set sail for Palmyra on June 1st, 1974. And they made it there by the 27th. But unfortunately, you may not have seen that from the overhead aerial shot that I showed you. There's an inlet to the lagoon that you have to find. It's very difficult to navigate. They couldn't find it, so they got stuck on the coral reef outside and weren't able to get through. So they set up camp in an abandoned World War II bunker and started to grow marijuana plants. And then little by little, they became low on food and water, and they start getting pretty desperate. That's the scene for Buck and Stephanie. Here's the good guys. We'll call them the good guys. This is Mac and Muff Graham. These are expert sailors. They had sailed around the world on their yacht, a 30-foot yacht called the Seawind. And they had gone to Hawaii, and for 1 year, they prepared their boat for their next adventure, which is to spend a couple of years in Palmyra. And they set sail on June 24th for Palmyra on the Seawind, planning to stay for a couple of years. And they arrived on July 2nd, which was just 5 days after Buck and Stephanie arrived. So the Grahams, they actually had a transceiver on board. It looks like a Yaesu from a picture that I've seen. I don't think they were ham radio operators, so they were probably operating illegally, but they kept in touch with a good friend of theirs, Curtis Shoemaker, KI6IHG in Hawaii. And Curtis, over time, learned that the two couples weren't getting along. In fact, they became bitter enemies. The last conversation he had with them was on August 28th. He never heard from Mac or Muff again. Well, 2 months later, Buck and Stephanie sailed into Honolulu on a Seawind all by themselves. And although the boat had been repainted with a new nameplate and was easily recognized by Mac and Muff's friends. So, of course, their story was that the Grahams had gone fishing. They drowned when their dinghy capsized. And so they decided to take over their boat since their own boat was no longer seaworthy. Now, that didn't go over very well. And after a bit of time and investigation, they were both arrested and convicted of boat theft in 1974. Stephanie got 2 years, served 7 months, but Buck got 10 years, but somehow escaped from a prison after 42 months, prison in Washington. And that would have been the end of the story, except 7 years later, a South African couple named Sharon and Robert Jordan were vacationing on Palmyra for 2 months, and they were walking along the beach when during low tide, a metal chest washed up. They opened up the metal chest and found the gruesome remains of basically Muff Graham, a human skull with a bullet hole, a human bones, a gold tooth, and a women's watch. So from dental records, Muff was identified, obviously had been dead for 7 years. Sharon Jordan, by the way, wrote a book called One Woman's Journey that chronicled this trip along with others. And of course, you can buy it on Amazon for 20 bucks. So Buck and Stephanie were tracked down, caught, arrested, and charged with first-degree murder, and then they were tried separately. The murder trial was moved from Hawaii to San Francisco. In 1985, Buck was found guilty. He spent 22 years in prison. He was paroled in 2007, lived in a trailer outside Sacramento for a few years, and then died. While he was in jail, he wrote his own account, Palmyra, the True Story of an Island Tragedy, using his pen name, Wesley Walker. And you can buy that, of course, on Amazon for $27. But read the reviews first. One review said, a riveting and unforgettable tale of love and adventure gone dreadfully wrong. Another review says, a pitiful pot full of lies. So let the buyer beware. At 733 pages, however, it might make a nice paperweight. What about his girlfriend? Well, she came from a very wealthy family in San Diego, and they were able to afford a really excellent attorney named Vince Bugliosi. I don't know if that rings a bell with you, but he was the acclaimed prosecutor of Charles Manson. And he put her on the stand. She did a convincing, tearful display, claiming she had no idea what was going on. And so she was acquitted. She didn't spend any time in jail at all. Well, Vincent had accumulated a whole lot of information. He decided to write a book, and it's called And the Sea Will Tell. It became a #1 bestseller. He's the co-author of Helter Skelter, as you can imagine. And then, of course, you can buy that for 20 bucks on Amazon. And the next thing that happened was that he sold the rights to Columbia Pictures, and they did crank out a movie. It's called And the Sea Will Tell, same title, and it stars Rachel Ward, James Brolin, Richard Crenna. It's actually a great movie, and it's pretty true to form. I don't know if you can buy it on, I haven't seen it on Amazon, but I think you can find it somewhere on the internet. Some of it was actually shot in Palmyra. So that's the story of that curse. And last but not least, there's another one. Dr. David Gardner, a respected neurosurgeon from Southern California, put together the expedition to go to Palmyra with 7 operators. And they took off from Hawaii on this Lockheed Lodestar. Unfortunately, the weather wasn't so great. They decided to come in during the night, during a severe rainstorm, and it completely destroyed the plane. One of the passengers suffered a spinal fracture, and the next day she had to be evacuated by the Coast Guard. The rest of the members stayed around to operate, but on the 10th of January, the team leader, a neurosurgeon, he lacerated his hand on broken glass, and people were so afraid that he was going to become infected or else be incapacitated as a surgeon. They said to the Coast Guard, we need your help. They came in the next day and flew out. So they were only there 6 days, actually. Now, they did make a bunch of QSOs, I think 15,000. And if you were one of the lucky ones to work them, you would get this QSL card. And this is not exactly the kind of QSL card that the DXpedition wants to send you, but it's valid, and it's probably a collector's item today. Watch your audio, guys. Okay, so at this point, you're obviously asking yourself, why the hell would any radio operator want to go to Palmyra? Well, there's a good reason. First of all, in 2000, when we were planning this back in 2015, it ranked as on the demand list. It was #9 in the world, worldwide, and in Europe it was ranked even higher too, because it's hard to work. It's hard for a lot of Europeans to work places like Palmyra in the Pacific, and you're going over the pole to do it. So demand was there, and the reason it was so high is because the last time anybody had operated there was in 2005. So we knew that there'd be a big demand if we could get permission to go. That's the key word, getting permission to go. Now, for all these trips, you have to get past no, and no presents itself in lots of different forms. You're often told you can't go there because it's too physically remote, or there's a political problem, or it's going to cost you too much money. Or if you get there, you're not sure you're going to be able to access the location. So it's an uphill battle. And in this particular case, it was twice as hard because we needed to get permission from both the Fish and Wildlife and the Nature Conservancy, because both of them have control over Palmyra. The Nature Conservancy runs Cooper Island, and then U.S. Fish and Wildlife, everything else. Well, I won't bore you with the process. It was long and competitive, but it took a while. But we finally got a precious SUP. That's called Special Use Permit. It was granted in January 2015. And we had several different dates that we could go. We chose a year later, January 2016, because we knew we had to take some time to prepare for this. And also the logistics were important. So we figured a safe date would be January 2016, and that was our date. They said you can stay for 14 days. You can't go anywhere except Cooper Island. Please don't interfere with the birds. We don't want you to make any kind of negative environmental impact, and please don't embarrass yourself by bringing any weapons or drugs or try to do any gambling. We just won't allow that. And oh, by the way, we don't want you to put up anything other than vertical antennas because we're afraid you're going to hurt the birds. We're going to help you charter a jet, but it's only going to take 9 operators. And the reason is we can't get a jet that's bigger than that because the FAA wouldn't certify any larger plane to be used on the runway on Palmyra, which is not that great. Oh, and by the way, please send us a $60,000 non-refundable deposit to hold your place, which we did. Well, there's the guys that came together. These are the 9 guys that went. These are good friends of mine. Alan knows a lot of these guys, may have been on trips with some. They're a hardy group. I call them nature's best. And these are some of the things that happens when you go on a DXpedition. You want people who can get along, that people who have worked together where the trust level's high, the work ethic's high. People are used to operating in a high rate environment where there are a lot of people calling you at the same time. Everybody's trilingual, which means you can operate Morse code, phone, or digital. There are always people who focus and have a specialty sub-talent, like the antenna person or the guy who loves to do logistics or the medical people. Some people enjoy fundraising. There's IT requirements. There's something for everybody, no matter what your sub-talent is. And then, of course, there are 2 other key requirements. One is you better leave your ego in the parking lot. And you also better bring your sense of humor because you need it on trips like this. This was a good group. It was an honor and pleasure to work with these guys. Craig, K9CT, was responsible for getting the radios, testing them at his place, packing them up, make sure that the radios, the amplifiers, the laptops, the keyboards, everything was working. Tom and a couple other people did the antennas. And what you typically do is get the antennas, bring them to your house, put them together, make sure they work, take them apart, label them, put them in cases so that you can very easily and quickly put them back together, because time is of the essence when you go on a trip like this. You want to make sure that you're up and running as soon as you can. And then we have to have people going out to get lots of stuff. This is stuff that you think you're going to need, and you over order and bring it out because there's no Radio Shack on Palmyra. If you haven't remembered to bring it, you left it home, it's too late at that point. I volunteered to do a few things, including build a website, which still exists. You can go to it at palmyra2016.org, design the QSL card. And I also came up with this little logo that you see. I actually have it on my shirt right here. And actually, not only is the logo that we use for fundraising, but also we were able to get it and use it as a shirt patch. And by the way, K5P, for those who are not hams, that's the call sign that we used on Palmyra. You'll see that everywhere. Before we knew it, it was time to go, to get ready to go. And this is true for a lot of these places. You have to get proper immunizations. In our case, we only needed tetanus shots. Everyone who does this must have independent medical evacuation insurance, because if something bad happens to you, somebody needs to come and get you to take you home. So nobody goes on a trip like this without having a blanket insurance policy to make sure that you're covered in case of an emergency. We were told ahead of time, don't bring more than 40 pounds. We didn't. And then in the 20-page document that we got from the Fish and Wildlife, they said you must freeze your clothes before 48 hours before leaving. So my wife got tired of seeing my underwear in the freezer, but that's what we had to do. And this happens no matter where you go to these islands. They just want you to, they're super cautious about, bringing in little critters that don't belong there. So on January 9th, we all flew from our QTHs to Honolulu. And we met on Sunday morning, January 10th. This is the first time the group of Nature's Best got a chance to meet with each other. And of course, the first thing you do is you decide what you're going to do for the next 2 weeks. Number one on our list, respect the rare opportunity to visit a highly restricted location as the guests of TNC and Fish and Wildlife by adhering to and obeying all the rules. Translation, don't screw up. And, I can tell you that, any of the guys that go on these DXpeditions that have special use permits, you just follow the letter of the guidelines. You don't even question it. And they're actually reasonable guidelines. They're mostly common sense anyway. We wanted to make sure that we set up quickly and efficiently. We thought we could get at least 60,000 contacts based on conditions and our setup that we were planning. We were going to try to focus on internationally, especially trying to work Europe, which is because it was ranked so highly there. When operate all modes, codes, sideband, and digital. And digital for us at that time was just RTTY. And of course, having a safe and fun trip. That evening, we met with some of the TNC and Fish and Wildlife people in a restaurant. They were pleased to meet us, gave us some more extra hints and tips about how to be successful, wished us well, and said, we'll see you at the airport tomorrow. And you can see one of our main hostess was Brenda Santos. You can see her in the lower right corner there. So next morning, we packed our bags, got on a shuttle bus, went out to Landmark Aviation. And as soon as we got there, we started talking to Brenda, and you can see that expression on Brenda's face in this photograph. She said, oh my God, you guys brought a whole lot of luggage. We had no idea that you were going to bring this much stuff. We need to talk to the pilot. So pilot says, you know what? We can take your Pelican cases with the radio and all your equipment and everything, but your personal luggage is not going to fit. So you're going to have to repack everything into small plastic carry-on bags. It's the only way it's going to work, because we have this little Falcon 50 charter jet. And so please follow me. And we went into the hangar, and there's only two words in a case like this that come to mind. It's no problem. So everyone ripped open their suitcases, start pulling out our stuff. Deborah comes by with plastic bags. She says, John, why are you taking 5 t-shirts? You only need 2. You're going to Palmyra near the equator. You can wash them and use them again. You don't need that much underwear. Here, give me this, take this underwear out of here. Literally, she's helping people unpack their suitcase and shove them into these plastic bags because the clock was ticking. And again, no problem. We were packed everything in these small plastic bags. It took us probably 45 minutes. And before you know it, we're ready to go. And so there's the happy campers ready to get on this plane to go to Palmyra. We got on board, and there's a pilot in the upper left-hand corner, and his son was the co-pilot. And you can see how tight it was. You can see our little plastic bags are stuffed everywhere we could. And we were up and running before you know it. So up in the air, we're on our way to Palmyra, when we all realized that even though Palmyra is 1,000 miles southwest from Hawaii, it's only 37 miles from Kingman Reef. And so we said, geez, this is a rare opportunity. Oh, pilot, do you think that you might be able to take a little detour and swing by Kingman Reef? We'd love to take a look and see what it looks like. And because we had said no problem to him, he said no problem to us. And so the next thing you know, We're flying over Kingman Reef on January 11th, 2016. Now this is Kingman Reef picture out my window at low tide. You can imagine what high tide look like. There is no more Kingman Reef. In fact, we were there flying over on January 11th, 2016. On March 29th, Kingman Reef was deleted from the DXCC list, dropping the total number of entities from 340 to 339. So it doesn't exist. You guys may have worked it in the past and gotten credit for it, but it's on the deleted list. It was an amazing sight to see that. Okay, because this pilot was so wonderful, we said, could you do us another big favor? We have a GoPro camera. Could you put the GoPro camera on your windshield? No problem, he said. So now we're coming into a landing to Palmyra. Can you guys hear the audio?
John, it sounds like they're shooting at you.
We were just waiting for the sweetest sound of all, which is when the wheels hit down. Notice on the left, the wind tunnel coming up on that's that green thing.
Got that one good. Air brakes.
You can see the runway is a little bit rough, but plenty good enough and plenty long enough for this kind of a landing. We were thrilled to be there. Of course, the question is, are you sure you want to be here? Well, guess what? They rolled out the red carpet for us. We met, were met by the 6 staff members. There were only six people on the island. And we became very, very good friends with these guys. There they are: Perry, Don, Billy, Harry, Alex, and Ben. Some of the most 6 of the most talented people we've ever met. Multi-talented people, kept that place going. They have scientific backgrounds, mechanical engineering backgrounds. Alex has many talents, but my favorite is the fact that he was a graduate of the Culinary Institute and was serving us meals beyond belief. The manager was Perry Barber, and he welcomed us with open arms and said, welcome and help, and thank you for more than doubling the population of Palmyra. Before we got there were 6 people. After we got there were 15. So, and that's the sign that says, welcome to Palmyra International Airport. They said, follow us. You can see where the runway is in the lower right corner, and that red dot, we're going to take a walk through all the way to what's called the Gallery. And this is our first, these are our first views of cursed Palmyra. You can see what the environment's like as we're walking along. These are some of the cabins that are there. Every cabin had a turtle and a number on it. So this is cabin number 4. And over on the left, you can just about see the dock peeking out over there. Heavy, dense foliage everywhere. And then we come through this clearing and we wind up at the Galley. Notice the solar panels on top. If you walk in, you find that this place is really a large building that has 2 main rooms. There's a dining and meeting area, and then one side, and the other side is a kitchen that's to die for. So we congregated around the table, and Perry Barber gave us a nice orientation, a welcome, and basically went over the ground rules. And he said, let's look at this map. because if the one outlined in black is Cooper, and that's where you're allowed to go. Our camp is right about there where the arrow is. You can't go anywhere else because you don't have permission to go anywhere else. To get permission, you'd have to go out, you'd have to get extra permission from Fish and Wildlife, and they're not here. They're not here to watch. So, you know, just stay on Cooper and you'll be fine. And that was our intention. We had plenty to do. So we were happy to get that. And then he went over some of the house rules. He said, probably the most important thing we can tell you to do at night is bring a flashlight. We do not want you crushing crabs with your feet. They're everywhere. And if you got to go out to make a run at night or wherever, please bring a flashlight. And here's our meal schedule. That's breakfast at 7, lunch at 12, dinner at 6:30. And by the way, everyone pitches in here. After breakfast, we expect you to clean, polish, sweep, mop the showers and toilets. And after dinner, we expect you to clean, polish, sweep, mop the kitchen. And at some point, we're going to ask you to take a break and help us do some leaf raking for about an hour. And of course, there's only 2 words to say altogether now. No problem, right? And so that was fine. We said we're more than happy to arrange our shifts such that we can comply. And they said, great, welcome aboard. Let's go get you guys checked into your cabins. There are 16 cabins on Palmyra, and they each hold 2 bunks. So theoretically, there's about 32 maximum people that could be there. It's never that full. I checked into my little cabin, number 9. This is what it looks like on the outside. This is what it looks like on the inside. It had 2 bunks. It had a nice closet for my clothes. Had a nice stand for miscellaneous, even a refrigerator. But the saving grace was the oscillating fan, because it was the humid was pretty bad there. It was pretty hot. So every one of these cabins, to my delight and surprise, you know, had this fan, which saved our butt. Of course, building number 38 was one of our favorites because it had these working toilets, which we didn't expect. And this is another luxury on the expeditions. And the big luxury here was the laundry and showers. When I'm telling you, literally, you could eat off the floor in any of these places because they keep it just absolutely spotless. They're not kidding. When they talk about cleaning up afterwards, they're just very, very, very thorough. And you just get into the culture of what's going on there very, very quickly. So we were just blown away that they had all this. And if we had known a little more about this ahead of time, we wouldn't have packed as much stuff to begin with. We just didn't realize we had all of this capability. We remarked later that for future DXpeditions, it's nice to tell people what those capabilities are. After we freshened up, it was time to take a short walk out to where we were going to set up the shack and our radios. So we took a walk out with that black dotted line, which says Main Street Road. This is what it looks like when you're walking out there. And it's a fairly short walk from our living quarters. And this, stepping back, there are really 2 buildings. The one on the left is a big garage workshop that contains several, there's a lot of tools and there's a lot of heavy machinery in there. There's a grader, there's a couple pickup trucks, there's different tools that are special tools that they use to help clear debris, crush glass, recycle things. But the science lab next to it is the one that we were assigned, and we were just blown away at the cleanliness and the size of this. This is where the scientists come from Scripps Institute and different universities and research centers to spend a week or 2 or 3 doing some of the marine studies and doing their experiments. So no one was there at the time we were there, so we had the place to ourselves. The first thing we wanted to know is, and we were just really had no idea what to expect, is where can we put our antennas? So here's an aerial view of the same thing. There's the garage and workshop and the headquarters, the K5P, the headquarters of the labs. And they said, you can do anything you want, basically. So we wound up putting vertical antennas, 2 in the front and 1 in the back. These are step IR vertical antennas. And we put up several other antennas. I can show you some photos of these. You can see for reference where we were right next to the West Lagoon. And so here's the day one where we're out putting up the vertical antennas. On the lower right, I'm carrying out part of the antenna with Tom Burson ND2T. And these vertical antennas go up on a stake. There's a stepper motor, that's the black thing. You string a whole lot of radials out. And of course, we took full advantage of the fact that we were near the lagoon, dropped some of those radials as far as the ground plane into the water. And before you know it, we had a really nice antenna farm on the front yard of Palmyra. Over where there's a stepper, you can see stepper east. You can see a 6-meter antenna. There's a small, we cheated and did have the Yagi. We weren't supposed to have it, but the guys there said, let's just put it up with a lot of flags. You probably won't have any problem. And there were a couple other antennas. You can see we had a 160-meter antenna as well. That the Battle Creek special. It's been all over the world. And in the backyard, we had what's called a switchable vertical dipole array, which is tunable, and we had it set for 20 meters and pointed to Europe the whole time we were there. And there's another one of the steppers. It was kind of camouflaged in the back. While all the antennas were going up, of course, there was another group of us that were working inside the science lab to set up all the radios. We walked in over to the science lab and we looked at the door, and the one on the left is the entrance, and it was labeled Palmyra Atoll Research Consortium. And that's, like I said, we just renamed it the Palmyra Amateur Radio Club and put up our banner, one of our banners. And they laughed and smiled and said, go for it. And they were very helpful. So we walked through the front door and this is what we saw. Well, again, we could have eaten off the tables and off the floor. This place was so clean. We thought, oh my God, we never expected something so luxurious. And just snap your fingers, because it became the K5P shack in no time at all. We set up 5 stations. You can see how they're positioned, 3 on the left, 2 on the right. We had, of course, we hung our banners, and we had radio sport headsets hanging from the ceiling. We had a whole game plan ahead of time of how we were going to set these up, which antennas were going to be on which bands, and so forth. And so it went very smoothly. Just to let you know, all those antennas have the coax cables coming together. We used over 2,400 feet of coax cables. They came in through the window, and they were then distributed inside that lab around to the different stations, depending on which antenna was going to go with which radio. Of course, we could switch them out fairly easily. But before you know it, we're up and running. This is the Dickwell station. We had 5 Elecraft K-line stations consisting of the K3 and the KPA 500. There's a match made in heaven, those two. They work together well. The KPA 500 works great. You don't need 220 volts. Ergonomically, these things fit on a desk perfectly. You can move them around. They don't weigh a lot. We had a laptop positioned on top of the P3 and the K3, make it easy. We used wireless keyboard and mouse. Stepper controllers right above, so we could easily change bands. And we were on the air. We were on the air so fast that 8 hours after we arrived, we put our first QSO in the log. It was QSO with JA3EA, January 12th at 0806. He was our first contact on 30 meter CW. We divided our 9-person into 3 teams of 3 so that we could operate around the clock. And this is our strategy. It was very simple. We had 3 stations on the air always. So when your shift was ready, you would go and operate. And then we had a 4th or 5th station operating as well, occupied by anyone who was off duty. If you didn't want to sleep, or if you didn't want to eat, or if you had extra time and you want to get on the air on a different band, please sit down and operate. That was the way we ran it. We always had 3 on and an extra 4th or 5th station, sometimes 5 on. We followed the gray line map continuously. We had an off-island reporting coming in via email from our pilot team, who would give us feedback on how we're doing, and they would give us advice on which bands to operate and concentrate on. That helped. We were focusing heavily on Europe whenever we could. And here's the reason. Here's the polar map again. And to get over to Europe, you got to go over the poles. We were always praying for European contacts coming through our headphones. And Here's a shot of Jerry and I actually spending extra time praying for some of those European contacts. Remember I said that you got to bring your sense of humor with you. You go on a DXpedition, somebody is always going to have a camera at the wrong place at the wrong time. So just, this probably was 3 a.m. when the bands were dead and we were both getting a little bit tired. It was, anyway. Once and then the expedition started, you got to manage your time. It takes some discipline because you're either going to be operating your shift and you definitely want to be on time. You might be operating another station. You might have to eat. You have to sleep for sure. You may have to fix something. Certainly there's some camp chores to worry about. And then last but not certainly least, you got to wander. You got to do that. Number one on our list was figuring out the whole eating arrangements, and boy, were we blown away. This is Alex's fantastic kitchen, and I kid you not, you could eat off the floor in this place. It was unbelievable what they had. And he had a freezer out back loaded for bear. This is a walk-in refrigerator. And so every meal was a feast. I mean, God, we had breakfast like this with scrambled eggs and bacon and scones. And for lunch, we had 5 different salads. For dinner, we had spaghetti and meatballs, and we had fish with different kinds of seafood. It was amazing. We didn't know what to expect. And we were just really grateful that, that we had that nourishment. During these times is when we got to know the staff. And I could spend a lot of time talking about some of the stories, but I'm just going to share this one because it's amazing. Our physician on board, one of the 9 operators, is Dr. Glenn Brown, or Dr. Glenn Johnson, sorry. Glenn is an orthopedic surgeon, and he's from the Midwest. And he sat down, he was talking to one of the staff members, a fellow named Ben Muckwall, and it goes like, how you doing? Where you from? Where you from? Well, I'm from a little town in Iowa called Marshalltown. I'll be darned. I'm from Marshalltown too. Really? I'll be darned. So they would exchange back and forth. And Glenn that night on a satellite phone, he called his wife Vivian and said, "You're not going to believe it. I'm out here in the middle of nowhere. And I met Ben Buchwald, who's from Marshalltown." And Vivian said, "Ben Buchwald. I think I know Ben's mother. In fact, I remember babysitting for Ben." So here Glenn Johnson's sitting in the middle of nowhere, and he's had a conversation with somebody that his wife used to babysit years and years ago. These things talk about serendipity. Yes, we did have to grab that mop, and we washed and polished and polished and washed. And then there was leaf raking day, and we did that as well. Without any complaints, with pure joy, keep this place beautiful. Now, I did mention that one of the things you get to do, we were lucky to be able to do that, was to wander. And this is a place that is just really special. Outside the galley, every morning we saw this red-footed booby sitting here. He's the mascot of Palmyra, or at least he was at the time I was there. And his name is Rain, spelled R-A-Y-N, and he loved to perform.
There you go.
There we go.
Feels good,
Come on, buddy.
Yeah.
Give us some more show. That's it. Yay.
Are you going fishing today? Yeah.
You can see from the photos that Rain was a performer, and he enjoyed hopping on your arm. I mentioned to you that I had the pleasure of designing this logo, and there he is, I had a red-footed booby on top of a straight key, and there he is on my arm. Well, I just won't forget that day very soon. So now we'll take a walk around the island. This is wander time, and it's a wander and wonder. Let me tell you, these are kind of the sights that you see on this island. It's just unbelievable. You see a lot of strange things. You see these signs that people have left behind that have survived the storms and weather, but they're there. Best boobies in the Pacific, crab buffet town, swim with the sharks, mysteries of Palmyra. But you also see some remnants of the past, frozen in time are the bunkers, and there are a lot of bunkers there. You can see these World War II bunkers there. They're overgrown. You know, nobody's bothering to take and trim things, but you can find them. And this is also true. It's true of Wake Island. It's true of all the islands out there that where they had some role to play during World War II. There are also some beautiful places, recreation places. This is the old swimming hole where the staff, I guess, goes swimming. We didn't have a chance to do that, but that's what they do to unwind a little bit. You'll listen to the breeze. That's the sound that you hear 24 hours a day on Palmyra. Wind, the wind is constantly going, and those coconut palm trees are constantly blowing. We did have a chance in our spare time. We organized things carefully. They said, if you want to go on a boat tour, we can take you out. You can't take the boat yourself, but we'll be happy to take you wherever you want to go. You can look at anything you want. And so we kind of went out off limits, kind of out to the outer islands. We did not get out of the boat. But there's a backward look at the headquarters back on the lab where we operated. And at one point, we went on a snorkeling trip. There's some of the guys underwater there taking, this is a snorkeler's paradise, scuba diver's paradise. There's so much to see. And we were privileged to go out for just a few hours. Everyone took some time to walk to North Beach. That's in the north side of the island. And this is the beach where that metal chest washed up during low tide that I told you about. So the signs to get you there, you have to follow the signs, and this is what you see when you're walking. This dense foliage, these ferns and trees, it's amazing. But eventually you come to this clearing, and as you walk out, you get onto North Beach, and this is just a sweep from left to right. That red line is exactly what we're looking at right now. You can walk out to the breakers. It's only a foot or a foot and a half deep. One of the staff members goes out there 2 or 3 days a week to collect samples for isotopes and other things. One day we went out with him. You can literally walk around the island if you want to, walk along the beach and all the way around to the other side. You come out on the runway, as you can tell from the map. Some people did that. We were walking along. We saw these black-tipped sharks. They were very curious. They kept kind of walking up or swimming up to us, splashing around, and then would head their way. They were just more curious than anything else. And of course, the birds, they'd come up, hover over, flap their wings like this, try to scare you a little bit, but they were more scared of you than the other way around. They were beautiful fairy terns there. We saw lots of other things like hermit crabs, of course, sea snake. And these guys are huge, these coconut crabs. This is the reason that you take a flashlight out at night. You don't want to step on one of these, or you don't want them to step on you. If they get a hold of your foot, it's not a pleasant thing. So we were extra careful that we weren't going to disturb the crab population. And by the way, in case you're wondering what happens to the leftovers, well, they go to Crab Town. This is where the best in fine dining. And so every night, or every day, I guess, at the end of the day, the leftovers are poured there, and then these guys just have a feast. Here they go. Nothing goes to waste on Palmyra. One of my favorite things to do was at the boathouse near the Galley. There's a boathouse. That's where the boat's docked. There's a light. If you turn it on at about 9 or 10 o'clock at night and wait a little bit, the mantas come in, and you can actually stand in the water. It's only a foot deep or so. And these mantas are so friendly and curious that they come by and they will tap your leg with their flipper. I've got several of these little QuickTime movies. I'm just going to show you one. I put a little soundtrack on it just kind of what I was thinking about when I replayed this. That was one of our favorite things, our favorite sites. We did find some critters. We didn't see anything too bad. This cane spider is not that bad, and they're so big, it's kind of hard not to spot them. So yeah, there were a few. In case you're wondering where they get their power, there's over 150 solar panels on Palmyra. I don't know what the number is now, but there's a huge bank of batteries that feed inverters to produce 120 and 240. And then during the night, to help recharge the batteries, they have diesel generators running, and you could hear those running. They don't love those diesel generators. They're trying to get rid of them. They have to keep them on to make sure that the batteries recharge if they drop below 80%. But at the time we were there, they had just finished constructing a wind turbine. And they were going to harness that energy, and the goal was to replace the generators, shut those down completely, to keep the batteries charged using wind energy, and help reduce their carbon footprint. Remember the DXpedition from hell? Well, that's what the plane looks like today. It's still there. It's just kind of just sitting there. Nobody's done much with it. But I can tell you that all of our call signs are carved in the fuselage someplace, as you can imagine. That's the Lockheed Lodestar today. A couple of the staff members said, would you like to see the little cabin, or the little hut rather, that Buck Walker lived in for a while? We said, well, not really, but sure, take us there. So we never would have found this place if it wasn't for them. And this is what it looks like from the outside, and this is what it looks like inside. So this is called Buck Walker's cabin. And so we all, of course, had a photo op inside Buck Walker's cabin. If you do some research on Palmyra, one of the things you're going to hear over and over again is that the beauty of this place is just almost indescribable, especially when it comes to the sunsets. And so these are some of the shots we took for sunsets on Palmyra. It's just amazing, just amazing. It's, yeah, this was one night that really blew everybody's mind. There's about 10 different versions of this photo depending on when you took it, because the lighting combination changed so many times. Just amazing. And there's Rain sitting on the chair. We had a little rainstorm, a nice rainbow afterwards. Well, believe it or not, it's time to leave. We were there for 2 weeks and the time flew by. So of course, we cleaned up the lab and left it in as good, if not better shape. All of our equipment is packed and ready to go. Let me just take a moment to tell you how we did. Our goal was 60,000 QSOs. We actually made 79,211. If you are into the numbers and you want to look at more statistics, we got a bunch. Just go to the website, Palmyra2016.org. There's a link on statistics. You can find out how many bands we worked, how many countries we worked, and so forth. Here's some other statistics. We were on the air for 344 hours, which is 20,640 minutes. We made 230 QSOs an hour on the average, or 3.8 for a minute, and the average number of QSOs per operator for 9 people was 8,800. Now I did check to see what we did to the demand. It was number 9 in 2015. It's currently sitting at 21. And here's the lesson from the expeditions. you never drive the demand never goes from 9 to 80. It drops down some, but there's always going to be a demand because you can never satisfy that even with 10 days or 2 weeks of hard work. So there's all these rare places are going to stay rare, and they continue to shift around, but they're always going to be in the top 20 or 30 or 40 most wanted countries. I did take a look at the red REDXA roster. There's 60 members on the roster. And this is what I tallied. Look in the log, and if you see your call sign up there, then those are the number of times that you worked us. I counted that the fact that you made, that we worked 34 of you, which was 57% of the roster. And if you add up the QSOs, it comes out to 299. Now, there are always a couple people who just kind of go overboard on these. And these three guys made a total of 62 QSOs. so I guess congratulations to to Len and to yes, and to K6MM and Al and Shot, of course, and W6SFK. I haven't met you yet. I don't know if you're online here, but congratulations. Now it's time to leave, and we had to leave something behind. Here's the Palmyra Yacht Club, and it's really something to see. There's a lot of graffiti, a lot of banners, a lot of stuff, but we decided to put, first of all, our call signs in the beam at the top. You can see them scratched up there. And then we hung this green banner from the ceiling as well. We autographed it, and I hope that it's still there today. And of course, it's banner time. Whenever you go on a DXpedition, you have to say thank you to the people who help sponsor you, the Northern California DX Foundation, Indexa, DX Engineering helped us with a lot of supplies, Craft, of course, for the radios. And of course, whenever I'm on a trip like this, if we forget a banner, I just say, well, we'll just flip it around, because there's always a way to, thank somebody later on, and, Photoshop's my friend and yours.
Love it.
So last group photo in front of the Lodestar. And then Jerry, who just loves his GoPro camera, put it on his head and ran out on the runway and said, I just got to watch this plane coming in. So there it is. And we said goodbye to our hosts, gave them all a hug. They were fantastic. One of the guys actually did a couple of RIDI QSOs the last couple nights and has vowed to get his license. I don't know if he did yet, but they were fascinated with everything that we did, and they learned a lot from us, but we sure as hell learned a lot from them. So we're on the shuttle bus back to Honolulu, back to our hotel, and I took this photograph of these four guys. And at the time, I kept thinking, geez, are they feeling forever cursed? And of course, the real answer is no. That, we want to go back there as soon as we possibly can. We'd love to go back. Everybody would love to go back. So I found this quote. I think it's kind of a fitting ending to the story. It's always going to belong to itself. I believe that that's true. Thanks. I'm sorry I ran a little bit over on time, but thanks for having me tonight.
Thank you, John. That was great.
Thank you very much, John.
Well done.
That was outstanding.
Hey, John.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
John, this is Siraj.
I know. I can tell.
Oh my gosh, you know my voice. Have I already seen this presentation?
You may have. You may have a couple years ago. Yes. And except I added a lot of new things since version 1.0.
Yeah.
And that's one of the fun things that I have when I do this. I get a chance to kind of relive the trip by doing this. And by the way, I've been asked to do this for a couple of other clubs that are not here. For example, I'm going to be doing this presentation to the Rochester DX Association, and I've been invited to do one similar to the Long Island DX. So let me play that in reverse. What that means to you is that you can reach out to some of the DXpedition guys outside of California and get them to do what I just did tonight. Just get them to do a Zoom presentation. You were talking earlier about how hard it is to get presenters. Just go reach out to somebody that's been on a DXpedition in the last year or two. Tell them you want them to do a Zoom, and they'll do it. And do it. It's during these crazy times, most clubs aren't meeting face to face. So you know, everyone's kind of stuck at home. You might as well try to leverage it that way. Just a suggestion.
And the movie can be streamed on Amazon Prime.
Good, you already checked. Good for you.
John, how did they get the heavy equipment onto the island? Is there a way for a come in by ship?
Barge. There's a barge that goes from that comes in from Hawaii to with that stuff. There, and of course, there's also they contract with I forgot the name of the firm to fly in supplies too. They can use the runway for some of that as well. But from heavy equipment, there's on one of the aerial view, the map that I showed you on the right side, there's an inlet, and there's one way to get on that into the inside of the lagoon. That's how we got our. We didn't take all the equipment on the plane. We couldn't fit. The only thing we brought on the plane were the black Pelican cases that had the radios in them. All the other stuff, which included coax cable and the antennas and all this other stuff, we had sent it to Hawaii, and then it was put on a barge to float over, you know, months ahead of time. That's why we had to do some advanced planning. But I don't know if that's answering your question, Alan. But that the heavy, anything that's heavy like that, any four-wheel vehicles or whatever,
right?
Would have come in on a barge.
Sure. Was the inlet a natural inlet?
No, they made during World War II. They dredged that thing out, and there were a lot more landing. The map that I showed you from World War II, there were a lot of other landings. There was like 6 different landing strips that they had stretched out there because they used it primarily as a refueling station.
When we were on Swains Island, there was also an inlet, but it had been blasted by the Navy during World War II. They made their own inlet. Yeah,
it's that way on Wake as well. There's an inlet there that comes in between there's 3 islands that make up Wake Atoll. Yeah, it was a typical dredging operation, I think.
Was that Matson that does the barge?
Pardon me?
Was that Matson Lines that does the barge still? M-A-T-S-O-N? They used to do all the inter-island stuff.
Not sure, to be honest.
Are there other groups working on, or are you guys working on trying to get back out there again?
We're trying to get permission to go to several places. That's one. Johnston Island is another. We're lucky in that one of the guys that does this is Don Greenbaum, N1DG, has
Diego Garcia.
He's been invited to participate as a consultant to Fish and Wildlife. Started about a year ago, because we've done enough of these operations, and they realize that we're actually somewhat trustworthy. We can come on to one of these locations and not destroy it, not make it worse, not kill the birds. And so they actually reached out and said, you know, we really need to collaborate with you a little bit more on the do's and don'ts. We think that, you know, we don't want to prevent you from going. We'd rather learn more about how, you know, how to do this the right way. So Don's actually helping kind of break some of those barriers to convince people that we know what we're doing. And what I haven't talked about, and what we always do, is when we go on one of these trips, we clean the place a little bit more. When I was on Baker Island, which is my last trip, we spent a lot of time walking around the beach and picking up I think it was 15 huge garbage bags of plastic debris. And that's one of the problems you see on all of these islands is you see all of the trash. and it comes from cruise ships, it comes from cargo ships, stuff gets thrown overboard. So in the bonus category, we always try to, spend time helping to clean the environment a little bit more, even though it's not required. But they appreciate that. And also when we're, this is one of those trips where we didn't take somebody with us, but the staff watched us like a hawk, those 6 people that were there, and they had to write reports every week on how we were doing. And so we got really good feedback about that. When I went to Baker, we actually took one of the biologists with us from Hawaii, who spent the whole time with us and actually became really good friends and understood what we were doing. And that's where the trust level comes from. So I'm hoping that we can get permission to go to some of these other places. The hard part now is just nobody's flying anywhere. No one's going to go on any of these islands until it's very safe. There are a couple places like Johnston, it's got other issues. It's got some environmental problems from dumpings from the past, and there's some red ants that nobody loves. So there's some places we want to go that we really don't want to go, but we just have to, we keep the relationship going. This is a relationship business. It's based on trust, and I'm sure we'll hear about some of these places out in the Pacific that will reactivate. Right now, the only time you see them in the military, like in Wake Island, there's a fellow in the military who went out there, and he has permission to operate. He runs 100 watts on a wire antenna, but that's not the reason he's there. He's there to do work. So there are a few places like that that'll only be activated if one of the soldiers happens to be a ham radio operator and has a some small radio that he can use. But yeah, those are wonderful places to go, and I'm really privileged to have had a chance to go to a few of those. We're hoping we can do more in the future.
Do these guys have internet on that island?
They do. Well,
Then you can put a remote station on it too if you put the funds into it, right? Somebody could or would not allow that.
Probably not.
No?
No, but what you're going to see in the future, I know somebody who's working on a system where you'll see probably somebody with a fairly sophisticated setup, and it will take a boat to an island, go on the island and set up a radio in a box with a generator and an antenna with a 900 megahertz link, wireless link to that. And 100% of the operation will be on the boat. They'll anchor the boat right offshore, and they'll have they'll be able to operate from, and it's perfectly legal by the current definitions of being able to, the transmitter has to be physically on the land where you're trying to get credit for. And I know that there's a big effort, a big push to start doing that. If you think about it, you don't need 9, 10, 15, 20 people. All you need is, a small crew on a boat, and you need, need to be able to have a very reliable wireless link to be able to operate. And that technology is fairly well known, and there are people now perfecting it even further. So 5 years from now, that's probably how some of the rare places are going to be reached. You can imagine that could happen.
That's so cool. And what a cool gig for Greenbaum. He's brilliant at that.
Yeah, he's a good one to have in that role.
Yeah.
Cool.
Any other questions?
No, not really a question, but a comment. It obviously helped a lot because the facilities were excellent on that place, right? You didn't have to go pitch a tent or make your own food and all that.
That's right.
Or bring
So
your
it
own
was
food for one.
It was a real luxury there. Yeah, it was a real luxury. It was. Don't want to give you the impression that it was free. It wasn't. Nothing was free, but
Is that where the $60,000 came in? Is that?
That was a good place to start.
Okay. I see.
Okay, any other questions? I think that's it. Thank you very, very much, John. Excellent.
Oh, my pleasure. Nice spending time with you guys. Stay safe.
Thank you, John.
Keep wearing those masks.
Yes,
Oh, we
can't
are.
wait to see you again one of these days.
Likewise. Yeah. Take
Next
care.
year in Visalia or
Yeah.
in 2 years or whatever.
All right.
Rod and Cun Club, crab feed. Yeah. See you all later.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Carry on, everybody. Dinner time for me.
Night, Alan.
Good night, all. 73.
Which cat is that that you're petting there?
Me, that was Devo.